joy and success. Every day is a chance for happiness. Yes, we can live a beautiful, crazy plan. Every day is a celebration. Every day is a celebration.
Hello and welcome to the Great Song Adventure. I'm Paul Zollo here with Louise Goffin. Hey, Louise.
Hi, Paul.
I'm happy we're back. It's New Year's Eve.
I know, here we are. It's at the end of 2018.
Quite a year, huh?
It's been a year.
And it's the year we started the podcast, and we're getting to the end of the year, and this is a great way to celebrate the new year coming up with part 2 of our interview with Mike Stoller, one of the most legendary songwriters there is.
It was amazing to talk to him. He was great with stories and recall and fine details about things.
Yeah. And so many classic songs that they wrote together, he and Leiber. And it's great to hear how he talks about it.
Yeah, and it was also nice. It was very relaxed because how many times has Mike been interviewed about these songs throughout his life? And here we were in his home, and he was in a very relaxed way telling us the inside baseball, so to speak, about the songwriting and what was behind it.
Yeah, and gradually adding more to famous stories that he had told before with Leiber, giving us new dimensions on some of those stories. It's great to hear it.
I love it. You know, I always thought of them as New York writers, you know, because of the early days of the Brill Building and all of that. But I realized that a lot of these songs that had locations were actually based in Los Angeles, and that was new for me.
Yeah, and they grew up in L.A. They're L.A. natives. Yeah. Then they went to New York and did a lot of writing there. They did all the Jailhouse Rock songs there in New York, as he talks about in the interview.
Yeah.
But L.A. guys.
And here we were looking out over the city, over these places where they'd worked in studios. Yeah, there was so many great stories, and I love talking about Love Potion Number 9 and how some of their stories had real places and other times they just needed to make up a location that rhymed.
Yeah, and he talks about Jerry being really funny with lyrics and how often he wasn't, as Jerry said, he wasn't writing songs, he was just in a conversation, and that's why I think the songs are so beautiful, because they come across in a conversational way.
I love songs with gags. I love, Dylan does that a lot, and my dad would do that sometimes too, where you have a couplet and the second line is an inside chuckle. You get the joke.
Yeah,
lightens it up.
Yeah, Jerry was really good at that too. He's famous for that too. Funny lyrics and funny rhyming, which we talk about. Mm-hmm. He seemed to just enjoy words so much and writing different kinds of songs.
Well, should we listen to part 2?
Let's do it. Part 2 of Mike Stoller.
When we moved to the Tapestry house, the house that Tapestry built, we had a big stack of vinyl, and I used to dance around playing coaster songs as a 12-year-old.
I told your mom once, I said, I don't know, I guess it was stupidity on my part. I always loved the way you played. I loved your songs. And I should have recorded you, but you weren't black.
Did you mostly work with black artists?
Mm-hmm. Mostly. But there were a few.
But it was unusual, for a songwriter to be a singer. Had you even considered that you could be the performer to someone that writes songs?
Oh, I loved the way she sang.
You did?
I did.
So do I.
When did you first meet my parents?
They came over to our office. I guess maybe Don Kirshner had called and said, I got some young people who are writing some good songs and that you might want to do with the Drifters. And it was like that. And I remember, she'd at the piano, and I would sometimes be playing a string line above while she was, but I loved what she wrote. And your dad, I remember, he was very intense.
Yeah, he was. He was a very pensive, thoughtful.
Yes. Man. Well, when we were working on the song, I think Jerry may have suggested a line here or there on up on the roof. But he was, at that moment, he was very intense. But I got to know your mom and dad a little bit more. I remember once, what it was, I left the Brill building, which is where they would come to play
From
their
around
songs
the
for
corner from
us.
1650 Broadway.
Yeah, we were at 1619. And I had no plans that evening for whatever reason. Maybe my first wife was busy or something. Anyway, I was out there and they said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I really don't have any plans. They said, well, why don't you have dinner with us? I said, that sounds great. Do you like Japanese food? I said, I don't know that I've ever eaten Japanese food. Oh, you'll love sushi. So I said, are you sure? And so we went to a Japanese, there was probably only one in New York at that time. And they introduced me to sushi, and I loved it.
Yeah, that was early to have sushi.
It was in the 60s,
Yeah.
obviously, early 60s, sometime around then.
It was around, I think I was learning how to use chopsticks when I was 2 or something. But we used to go down to Imperial Gardens on the Sunset Strip.
Yeah, I liked Imperial Gardens, but now it's Pink Taco or something.
Yeah, it's all changed around here.
Yeah.
You know, talking about songwriting, duos, you worked with Man and Wild too, and I noticed that some songs you had all 4 names, like on Broadway.
On Broadway,
all 4.
yeah.
How did that work? That one?
They had written a song called On Broadway. I don't remember all the lyrics to it. It was, I think it had a different kind of story. And I think Phil Spector made a recording of it, and it wasn't a hit. And Don Kirshner called and asked if we would work on it because he thought it had the makings of a hit. And we said, yeah, we would do it, but only if Barry and Cynthia were agreeable to doing it. And we sat around in Jerry's apartment, all 4 of us on the floor, and worked on lines, and I came up with a device that opened the thing up in terms of a rhyme, because they had, when they were starting, everything ended with an A rhyme, because it had to rhyme with On Broadway, and I said, well, why don't we put the word after, and so you can make any kind of rhyme. And that worked. You know, it opened it up.
And that was a lyrical solution. We always...
Well, yeah.
Jerry was taking care of all that.
On Broadway. And I said, why don't we just on Broadway, which opened up the possible lines.
It's really great lateral thinking and to get you out of a tight spot.
Yeah.
It worked amazing.
Yeah, Yakety Yak is sort of like that, where you have 4 lines and then the Yakety Yak tag on each verse. It's like an extra part to the verse.
I guess.
It's a lot.
Think about it that way.
And sometimes songwriters do that. They get themselves in a corner and get attached. And it's always, I think it's just such a great thing to be fluid and think, well, maybe it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah.
Well, it was having no attachment to the original song. It was easier for me to say, hey, why don't you do this, than if we had written the original song, we might have been more locked into
Yeah.
it and not found a way out.
I've heard the word song doctoring before, where a songwriter, seasoned songwriter, it could usually be a peer, say, I got this song, I've been stuck on it. And someone who's a songwriter sometimes has this objectivity and says, well, why do you need that to go there? If you move that, and it frees, it's like going to the doctor.
Yeah, but it's easier if you're not locked into the first version.
Yeah.
It's easier for someone else to come along and say, oh, do that.
Do you still enjoy songwriting, or when you listen to things you love, do you still enjoy the craft and appreciating the craft of songwriting?
Well, I always appreciated great craft in songwriting. I mean, listening to Cole Porter or the Gershwins, of course. I mean, those are grand masters, but
It still turns you on when you hear
I love,
things you
yeah.
love. Yeah.
But I don't listen that much. I should. I should listen to contemporary song, but I don't do it because I have found if I listen to the radio, so few and far between of contemporary songs turn me on. That I'm enjoying the craft, as you say.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel negligent in a way. I don't do the time.
Yeah, well, you also need to be nourished, and you want to trust the source you're going to nourish you and not let you down. That's a...
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think an obvious, huge distinction between a lot of modern songwriters is they're just creating the record while making the song. They're writing a record, whereas you guys are writing songs.
Well,
and then making
but we said we were writing records, but what we meant by that was that we conceived of the finished recording, including instrumental breaks and so on and so forth. And with the coasters, for example, I wrote the little interjections from the King Curtis played. Those were written out.
Mm-hmm.
Not his solos as such, but in between the phrases. That was all part of the record that we conceived.
You would build the record around the structure of a song, whereas a lot of people are making tracks and then writing a song to a track.
No, we never did that.
But for that reason, your songs have a million recordings. They last.
Technology wasn't, the technology led to that,
right?
I think, to laying down a bass pattern and then something else. And then on top of that, and ultimately a lyric and a song. No, I think that had to do, I'm repeating myself, I think that had to do with technology.
Yeah, and doesn't necessarily lead to timeless songs, whereas you have all these songs that have been recorded by so many artists for decades, and they're great songs. Stand By Me is as great today as it's ever been, and so many of them are that way. I don't know if you can get to that in the same way, but they're making
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The last 10 years my father was alive, he actually, there were a couple times he'd look at me and say, you think Will You Love Me Tomorrow is a good song? And really in that moment didn't know. Because he thought, I'm just writing them out, I'm just doing an assignment, and that was an assignment. And not having a perspective. And sometimes it's hard to have a perspective on your own work other than other people say they love it and you've heard lots of records
I think
made.
that's true.
Yeah.
Of course, your dad wrote those two great female lyrics.
Natural Woman
And
Will You Love
Will
Me
You
Tomorrow?
Love Me Tomorrow. Which are, they're wonderful, wonderful songs. In terms of, how can I put it? When Smokey Joe's Cafe, the show, came on in the late 90s, 1995, when it opened. We realized that we had never encountered our audience because we're not performers. And so we sat back and we were surprised that these songs that we had written at that time, 40 years ago, were still remembered. Because when we wrote them, we figured if we had a hit that might last, 6 months, that people would remember them, and then they'd be forgotten that all the great songs had already been written. The Great American Songbook, as it's known, and they are great songs. But we figured ours would be forgotten, and so it was kind of nice. And we would go sometimes early on when the show was just starting, and they had a souvenir book, and there was a picture of Jerry and me in it. And people would come up to us and say, you wrote those songs that are so important to us that we grew up on. And it was very nice to meet the people who were our audience because, your mom as a performer, of course, I'm sure got that kind of reaction from her fans right away.
But sometimes you see someone like Elvis do Hound Dog, you could see how the audience is reacting to that song. I mean, it's the song too.
But it's still
with some
different.
sex thrown in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this kind of a legend or maybe a myth about you guys that, Elvis took what was blues and they turned it into rock and roll. But that you guys didn't really like rock and roll, and you thought it was just a fad, that it wasn't really something you loved. Is that?
Well, I thought rock and roll was a marketing name. So, I don't know what rock and roll is, but when you say rock and roll, you imagine, oh yeah, I know what that is, as opposed to rhythm and blues. But still, it's a... and since then, all these types of music, grunge.
Yeah, they grew out of rock and roll.
What are they?
But the early rock and roll was like Hound Dog. I mean, that was the fundamental, beautiful.
It's very frustrating
sped up blues, basically. Right?
Yeah, to put things into these tight
categories, but it's good for marketing.
Yeah.
And yet rock and roll, a big one, though. I mean, that works in terms of marketing.
I guess it's lasted a long time.
I mean, I think that's the reason. To us, it's surprising to hear that you say that you're surprised that people like these songs because they're part of our lives. Hound Dog is so fundamental, and Always Stand By Me. They're standards to us.
They have become.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess.
So now, when you look at those rock and roll songs, do you like those songs? Are you proud of them the way you're proud of all your songs?
Which ones? It depends.
It depends.
I'm proud of some.
There's different versions of each one.
Yeah, I'm proud of some of them. Sure.
I mean, what you and Jerry did obviously is the ultimate songwriter dream. A songwriter dreams to have one song that everyone knows. That's the ultimate song that'll live on past you. And you guys have so many. I mean, do you feel that? I mean, did that give you a sense of we've done it? Because as a songwriter, you can't do much better than what you guys have done.
I have not thought about it in that sense. But again, the show has always been, not always, but since the show opened in 1995, which has a whole bunch of about 39 or 40 of our songs in it, the feeling that, maybe... and also we felt very lucky.
Yeah, lucky. You guys made it happen. You guys are working hard, and producing.
We did work hard,
yeah.
But we didn't know that it was, valuable time. We just worked hard. We used to work 18 hours a day. But it didn't feel like work because we were having fun.
Yeah.
It's a great job.
Yeah.
Was Smokey Joe's Cafe a real place? Was that based on?
It was based on a place called Smokey Joe's, which was at where the Beverly Center is now, at the corner of La Cienega and Beverly. Yeah, there was a right at that corner where the big imposing
Center.
the
Yeah.
Beverly Center,
Right.
yeah, and right on that corner was like a kiddie park with a little Ferris wheel, a little tiny Ferris wheel, and pony ride and stuff like that. And a little further down was a beanery called Smokey Joe's,
Oh, not Barney's.
not cafe.
Yeah.
But we had an office at that time on Melrose,
Mm-hmm.
just west of La Cienega, and we would pass that on the way to the office, and so that, but we needed another word to make it land, so it became Smokey
Have a
Joe's
rhyming
Cafe.
word. Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun.
I always picture that as an East Coast thing, you know, on the records it feels East Coast. I would have never guessed it was La Cienega and
Yeah,
Melrose. or
the
Beverly.
original record, was done out here with the Robins.
Mhm.
You know, I was wondering that with Love Potion number 9 when you said like 34th and Vine. Is that here, Vine Street here? And no, so
No, Vine was good because the word 9 vibrates. In fact, when I go to a doctor and he's testing, he'll put his hand on my back and say, "Now say 9."
I didn't know.
But we liked it because it sounded good, 9.
9. That's such a great song.
But we, because we had it right in cell block number 9. But we used it in Kansas City, but that was a real place, 12th Street and Vine. But it worked, and so we used in Love Potion number 9. 34th and Vine. We needed a rhyme for 9.
that's what I figured because there's no 34th. I think that intersects with Vine here. So I was wondering about that.
Right. Yeah.
But that song, like so many of Jerry's, like his lyrics, your songs, it's funny. Like you were saying, there's a lot of really funny lyrics and it's whimsical. Do you remember where that came from? There's so many funny. Even the rhyming is funny. You're gonna take an ocean of calamine lotion. It's funny rhyming even.
That's a funny rhyme. Yeah.
Do you remember how that one came about, where it started? But they could come from music or lyrics.
I think some of the best couplets have a
That
gag.
was Poison Ivy.
Oh, it's Poison Ivy. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm confusing.
That's all right. It took me a moment
Yeah,
to
no
figure
wonder I'm
out
throwing you
what
off.
I was going
What's
Yeah,
he
the
on?
right song.
What's he on about? Yeah, I mean, Dylan would do that a lot. When there's a couplet and the second half of it has a bit of a gag to it, it sounds more it sounds more conversational, like people you're hanging out with, not as studied, more
Yes.
authentic.
You're right. Poison Ivy, of course. Gonna take an ocean of calamine lotion.
You'll be scratching like a hound.
Both great songs. Love Potion number 9 is actually in a minor key. You know, most of those kind of rock songs you have in major keys, but
Mostly, yeah.
the Coasters version has horns, and it's really cool. And the Clovers version is
The
different.
Clovers
The Clover-
was the first record. It was in our bag. We had to collect songs that we'd written for a next session for the Coasters, and there was a guy who had been the national sales manager for Atlantic Records, and he had a group that he'd brought in from Washington or Baltimore, I think, called the Clovers, and he managed the Clovers, and they were dropped from Atlantic, and he was dropped as the sales manager, and he got a job as the head of a new record company at United Artists. They just started a record company. Lou Crefts was his name, and he said, "Guys, I need a hit. It's I got this job, but I got to have a hit record, and I need one for the Clovers." So we took this song, Love Potion Number 9, and said, "Okay, we'll do it with the Clovers," and we did, and we had a hit.
Yeah, that's a great version. But the Coasters version is really great too. With the horns, it's a different.
Yeah,
feeling
that's
as
the one
well.
I'm thinking of, and it's unusual from the rest of the Coasters' sound.
Oh, it starts off, yeah. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
Oh, we had them sing, "Serve it up and drink it down."
Yeah, that's a counterpoint.
Right, and that version is in the new version of Smokey Joe's Cafe in the show.
Oh,
They're doing
wonderful.
that.
That's a really great part in there too. That's really nice.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I like that.
But the Clovers was the first one. That was the first version of Clovers?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I see.
It was supposed to be for the Coasters, but since Lou needed a hit with...
You know, we did mention Elvis, and you were in the studio with him so many times. I wanted to ask you about that, because as you were mentioning, you weren't making tracks and overdubbing. They were singing with a live band.
Mm-hmm.
And I understood he could do a lot of takes and just get better. I mean, did you have a good experience
Well,
with him in the studio? No?
Yeah, I mean, Jailhouse Rock, for example, we were up to, 29 or 39 takes, and we kept saying, "Elvis, I think we got it. I think we got it." Like take 9 or something. He said, "No, I can do it better." And Jerry always referred to him as an Olympic champion of performing, He would just keep going, but finally he said, "Well, all right, let's listen to that one that you guys like." We played it. He said, "Yeah, that's it."
Oh, is that right? I assumed that the later take was the one you would use, but you go back to the good one.
Yeah.
He'd go back to an earlier one.
Yeah.
That you knew.
A good one. Yeah. Well, again, that was an example of our producing purely for the sake of protecting our songs, because we didn't get paid for producing those things. In fact, what happened, he asked to meet us. He had already done Hound Dog and Love Me, which was, they had asked us to submit something else. Mm-hmm. And then we did Loving You for a movie. And then he wanted to meet us, so that was great. We thought we'd meet him. And so we went to the studio. It was out here at Radio Recorders, down on Sycamore off of Santa Monica Boulevard. And, we hit it off right away, but Steve Scholes was the head of RCA Records at that time. And all Steve would do was say, RCA 39472, take 1. And, he wasn't interacting. So we started talking, and I went out on the floor and worked with the musicians, and Jerry would be on the microphone saying, "Now let's take that, let's do it a hair faster, just a hair, just a tiny bit faster or something." And within a few hours, Steve Scholes just left. And we ran the sessions, at least on our own songs. And but we had to tell Elvis, that's Jerry. I'm Mike. Don't call us sir. After all, we were 2 years older than he was. And he was a very polite Southern boy.
And professional in the studio, and I mean, he did many takes.
Oh,
but he
in the
was good.
studio, he was at home in the studio. And he loved performing. He really did.
It's sad that the Colonel figured put him in movies instead of putting him on tour and taking him to Europe. He would
Well,
maybe done.
yeah.
better.
And then we had this one dream that seemed to show up. Jerry had gone to a cocktail party with someone, and a producer, a film producer, well, he was a big agent who also, I think, produced films, said to Jerry, I just bought this great novel by Nelson Algren, and I want you guys to write the score for it. And I'm going to get, Kazan is going to direct it, and Bud Schulberg will write the book, and I'll get James Wong Howe to do the cinematography. I want you guys to write the songs and to help us get Elvis to play the lead. And we thought, wow, what a fantastic opportunity. And, you know, Elvis had talked, you know, because I spent some time with him being in the movie. So we were on Jailhouse Rock. I was on the set there with him. And I knew he was crazy about On the Waterfront and Marlon Brando. He aspired to, and those were all the people who had made On the Waterfront.
Yeah.
So Jerry and I went to the music publishers and told them about this great opportunity. And he said, well, boys, you know, I got to talk to the Colonel. So if you wait outside, let me reach the Colonel and talk to him. And we were wondering how they were going to reward us for bringing this great project. And we were finally called back in, and Gene said, the Colonel says if you ever dare try to interfere in the career of Elvis Presley again, you will never work in New York, London, Hollywood, or anywhere else.
Wow.
And then we stopped writing for him. It was so disappointing.
And stupid of him, too, wasn't he? Made one of many bad choices that guy made.
Well, you know, maybe he didn't trust anything, the Colonel. He just wanted to keep cranking out the same thing over and over. And so he didn't give Elvis the opportunity to grow as an artist.
Yeah.
And he deprived us of that opportunity at that time as well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's sad.
Yeah, it's a shame. But when you were working with him, Elvis was in his prime. He was still great.
Oh,
and
yeah.
still
And this
happy
year,
sound.
you know, they're re-releasing the 68 special. It's the 50th year.
The singer special.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked so fantastic in that. You've seen it, I'm sure.
It was his big comeback in
The
black
68.
leather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen that. I think I saw
He
it
got
in
in
the
good shape
70s.
again. Yeah.
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 It was one of the rare times he could
the
perform.
68
but you're right.
comeback special.
That's what he needed to do. If
Yeah.
he never even went to Europe once to perform. They would have loved him.
You know why? Of course, you know the
You tell me.
story. Huh?
Will you tell us? Does it have to do with the Colonel not being able to go to Europe?
The Colonel was not a U.S. citizen. The Colonel was a Dutchman who had jumped ship and created his persona, you know, as a colonel and as a Southern guy, and got to manage Eddie Arnold and Hank Snow or Jimmy Rogers Snow. I don't remember which Snow, but he snowed a lot of people.
He did.
And he couldn't leave the country because he might not be able to come back. He had no passport.
Wow.
Too bad for Elvis.
And so Elvis, when he was in the service, he didn't really perform much over there. He was a soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, they could go to Hawaii because it was the U.S. And apparently he had done something terrible. I don't know if he killed somebody or swindled somebody.
There is that myth that there was a murder that he did.
Yeah,
I'm never sure if that was true.
Swindling, I would believe in a moment.
Yeah, that's a sad story. We don't want to end there, but
Well, we learned, again, we went to, in the 90s, it was the first time Jerry and I ever went to Memphis. And we were given a personal tour of Graceland by Georgie Klein, who was one of his buddies, the Memphis Mafia, who we had met in 1956, 57, when we first met Elvis. And we told him about that. He said Elvis would have given his right arm to be able to do something like that. He never knew that this opportunity existed. And that was very sad.
yeah, it's tragic because he was so great.
What did you think when the Beatles came out?
I loved them.
That's cool because you knew it was good. Some people
I loved
didn't
them.
like it.
Jerry wasn't crazy about them till after. I mean, I loved them right from the get with "I Want to Hold Your Hand" and all that. I thought it was just charming and fun and everything. But then to hear them, Eleanor Rigby and
I Am the Walrus and
yeah, wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm supposed to do a interview with Sirius on the Beatles thing. I don't know if I'll do it because of the timing. They want me on a particular evening at 6:30, and I can't. I said I'll do it at 6:15, but I
should
can't.
take care of
I
you.
gotta.
It's smart.
I got a birthday party I have to go to. Anyway, no, I loved them, and I loved the work they did after. I met all of them. Paul, his first wife was Linda, and she was the daughter of Lee Eastman, who was our attorney for a while in New York. And I met John at a BMI dinner once, way back, a small dinner.
Well, I know for them, they wanted to be a songwriting team. They always said like Goffin and King or Leiber and Stoller. They were really aware of songwriting teams. Lennon and McCartney were modeled on that, and they loved your songs, obviously.
Well, their
Three
demo,
Cool Cats too. Right?
yeah, their demo album, which they used to try to get a recording contract, had about 5 of our songs on it.
Right. Three Cool Cats and a few others. Great stuff.
Searching, was
Right.
it? I can't remember all of them.
And they loved to do harmony. They were good at singing the
Yeah.
parts. They really knew what you were doing in a beautiful way.
And Bob Dylan?
Well, I liked Bob Dylan's songs, a lot of them. I didn't like all of them, but I was a fan of Blowing in the Wind. Come on. I don't know what happened. Jerry may have not been as fond of them as I. He might have said something, because then we found out that He denigrated Leiber and Stoller recently when he got some.
You got a Music Cares award.
Maybe that was it. Somebody told me about it, that he dismissed Leiber and Stoller. And,
Wow, if that's true, I'm surprised because he has great reverence for great songwriters. I'd be surprised.
well,
But, you know, who knows what caused that?
but
I do remember when
but I like his songs anyway. Well, I don't care.
you're mentioning Randy Newman. I remember, because I grew up, he was one of my idols, and when I talked to him, he said, you know who's one of the greatest lyricists? Well, as a musician, he loved Carole King. That was his first idol. But he said, as a lyricist, he said Jerry Leiber. And I see now why. You know, those conversational, funny lyrics. You know, Randy really got a lot out of that.
Yeah, he. There was an early song of ours that he loved. When we first met, he mentioned a few of our songs that he liked.
Yeah. Well, do you have hope that good songwriting is going to continue? I mean, you've seen it go in so many different
There's
directions.
always been good songwriting. There's always been lousy songwriting, you know.
Right.
And I'm sure there's some real good stuff being done today that I'm just not listening to.
Do you stream?
No.
The one benefit about streaming is that you could drive in your car and plug
I'm
in
not
here.
that technologically equipped.
Do you still listen to music a lot? Do you listen for fun?
I do to certain things, yeah, sure.
So what do you put on when you want to listen to something?
Some Brazilian stuff. Sometimes some impressionist composers. You know, I don't listen as much as I ought to, but I still listen.
You've probably heard a lot. You've heard a lot of music in your time, maybe.
Well, it's not a storehouse, you know. I don't
Right.
remember everything I've ever heard.
You know, one other thing, we'll wrap it up quick. I was not prepared for you to talk about, you know, the civil rights issues and how that affected your music. I'm seeing Desmond Tutu and, you know, big Obama in the front. So
Well, my wife is involved in a. I mean, she's a wonderful musician,
you know,
but she's involved in a documentary about Desmond Tutu with another young woman, and who goes back and forth to South Africa and she's involved in that project, and hopefully they'll get it edited. Well, you know, they have a lot of those tour buses that come up and along here, so we want that out there. They sometimes mention me.
What is that painting on the wall there? It's so great with the window and the New York.
So I'll have to take a photo now so we know what we're talking about.
That photo Jerry and I bought at the Jewish Museum in New York in around 1960-ish. And they're almost all people we know. I don't know everyone. The tall guy, I know who he is. He's a painter named Alex Katz, but I don't know him. But I know Morty Feldman on the far end was a composer, Morton Feldman, and he was a close buddy of mine. And Larry Rivers, a painter who used to play saxophone, and Sam Hunter was a curator. The next guy over with his hand like this is Frank O'Hara, the poet.
Wow.
And behind him in a gray suit holding a cigarette is Howard Kanovitz, who's my fishing buddy and who painted the whole picture. And he used to be a trombone player. That's just the back of a head. The other guy is in real estate, and he's a patron of the arts. And it's called The New Yorkers 2. the New Yorkers one had Rogers and Hammerstein and some other people in it.
Wow,
I love it.
beautiful. Yeah, great.
And the buildings across the street
Yeah,
that are in
that's-
black and white.
Right, that's from around 7th Street and 2nd Avenue, that neighborhood where Howard used to have a studio.
It's really,
Beautiful.
yeah, impactful.
The only guy who is still alive is Katz, Alex Katz.
Hmm.
Everybody
The one
else
standing
is-
up on
Yeah,
the far right.
yeah, he still has some shows going on.
Wow, beautiful. Well,
Great
thank you
colors.
very much for taking this time. It's such a pleasure.
Yeah,
to get to
thank you,
Not
Mike.
at all.
So-
Some of this was a long time ago, the 50s.
Yeah,
that's
it was
we're
great.
asking
It
you
was
about
great.
some stuff.
Well, some things I remember clearly and perfectly, and others I can blame it on my age. It's lovely to look at you because you do resemble your mother so much.
Oh, thank you. Well, since I've let my hair, my freak flag fly, as they say, I resemble her more. I used to wear my hair dark, and then people would say I look like my father.
Ah,
But,
You do look like both of them. You look
I
like
guess you do, but
if I had a beard,
yeah,
I
that-
tried working with your dad more recently. It was a while ago, but it was too late, and he wanted to write a Coasters song. You know,
did he call you 35 years later?
kind of. And I tried. Well, I did write a song with him.
Huh.
I don't think it was his or my best song.
But you said he was upset when Dylan came, kind of comparing him to Dylan and other songwriters from generations. They didn't like the changes, like Beatles. I mean, Jerry was different, but it's unusual that you seem to really like all that stuff.
Oh,
you
I
had no
love the
problem
Beatles.
with it. Yeah. A lot of those
I
older
never
guys.
felt that I was threatened by them. I enjoyed them.
You recognize it was good music too. You're a musician. You
Yeah,
heard-
yeah.
A lot of those guys, it's wrecking songwriting. What the not just the Beatles, but rock and roll in general.
Well, that
songwriting.
that started when we started writing.
They blamed you.
Well, thank you so much.
That was our talk with the great Mike Stoller, and a great way to wrap up 2018, the first year of our podcast. That's a good place to end with Mike Stoller.
That's a great place to end. And this has been great doing this with you. I'm really happy that you wanted to do this with me, and I hope we go on many more years with this.
I do too, and I love doing it with you too. And there's something pretty special about going with you because everyone already knows you and likes you. That helps. But we've already done some great ones that are going to come up next year, which is actually 2019, which is hard to believe. And including a songwriter you know pretty well, Carole King, is coming up. Is that right?
Yeah, that was amazing because, the thing is I've learned at this point in my mother's career not to ask her because she does a lot of other things now and says no to most everything. But she came to me and said she'd been listening to our podcast and loved it, and can she please do it?
How cool of her that she wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And she had a lot to say. She had so much energy, and it was exciting. We sat down and we talked for many hours.
Many hours, to the point where we're going to have a 5-episode special on her, and that will start on February 9th, her birthday.
Yeah, like a Carole King marathon, which is wonderful. And covering so much, and your personal history and her legendary history and writing with your dad. Quite great. So I'm so thrilled she did that.
And we have some other great ones coming up. We have Fred Tackett talking about his time with Little Feat.
Yeah, Lowell
And,
George.
and Lowell George. And we were speaking to Josh McClure from the Stripes, a young musician, and Joachim Cooter.
Joachim Cooter, Ry Cooter's son, who is really a wonderful musician and a thoughtful guy. Happy to have an interview with him.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us for all of our special episodes this year, ending with New Year's Eve with Mike Stoller, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year. You can follow us on Facebook at The Great Song Adventure, and on Instagram, we're at the same handle, The Great Song Adventure. We're on YouTube. Where else are we?
We're everywhere. On Twitter, did you mention that?
Oh, yeah, we're on
Yeah.
Twitter. Follow us on Twitter. Thanks so much and have a safe New Year's Eve and a Happy New Year.